There is a concrete that repairs its own cracks. It gets stronger in seawater, and once you build with it, the structure never needs replacing. For 2,000 years, it has held up domes, harbors, and walls without a single repair. Then we replaced it. We swapped it for a concrete that crumbles in 50 years. We did not stop using it because it failed. We stopped because concrete that lasts forever is concrete they cannot sell. A material that heals itself eliminates the need for repair contracts, replacement cycles, and an industry worth $400 billion a year. And what cannot be sold on a schedule cannot sustain a profit model. This is the story of the Roman formula that built an empire, survived 2 millennia under the sea, and still stands while everything we pour today is already cracking. The history begins on the shores of the Bay of Naples, roughly 300 years before Christ. Roman builders are experimenting. They take volcanic ash from the fields near Pozzuoli, a town sitting in the shadow of what will one day become Vesuvius. They mix it with lime and chunks of rock. They add seawater. What they pour does not just harden, it transforms. The Romans call it opus caementitium. The ash they use becomes known as pozzolana, named for the town where they dig it. No one alive fully understands why it works so well, but the builders know what they see. The material bonds to itself. It sets underwater. It holds weight that stone alone cannot, and it does not crack. A builder places his hand against a freshly cured wall. It is cool to the touch, dense, unyielding. He strikes it with an iron tool. It does not chip. It does not flake. It rings. Within a generation, Roman engineers realize what they have. This is not mortar. This is not plaster. This is something entirely new. A material that can be poured into any shape, that sets like stone but weighs less, that bonds to itself across joints and seams as though it were one continuous mass. By the 1st century, they are pouring this concrete into the most ambitious structures the ancient world has ever seen. Trajan's markets rise in Rome around 110 AD, a complex of over 150 shops and offices, 6 stories high, built with concrete vaults that still stand today. The port of Caesarea, in modern-day Israel, is constructed with massive concrete piers sunk directly into the Mediterranean. Seawater does not weaken them, it makes them stronger. At Baiae, on the Italian coast, entire harbor structures are submerged and remain intact century after century. Then comes the Pantheon, completed around 126 AD under Emperor Hadrian. Its dome spans 43.3 meters across. It is the largest unreinforced concrete dome ever built. No steel, no rebar, no modern reinforcement of any kind. Just Roman concrete shaped into a perfect hemisphere with an open oculus at the top that lets in rain and light. 2,000 years later, it has never been structurally repaired, not once. Engineers today cannot fully explain how it has survived earthquakes, floods, and centuries of weathering without a single failure. But the man who first wrote down the recipe tried to tell us. His name was Marcus Vitruvius Pollio. Around 30 BC, he completed a text called De Architectura, 10 books on building. In it, he described how Roman builders selected their pozzolana, how they mixed their lime, and how they cured their concrete slowly over weeks and months. Pliny the Elder, writing decades later, documented the specific volcanic ash deposits near Pozzuoli that gave the concrete its power. These men recorded a formula that would outlast their civilization by 2,000 years. And then the civilization fell. Rome collapsed in the 5th century. The trade networks that moved pozzolana across the empire broke apart. The skilled builders who understood hot mixing and slow curing scattered or died. The formula was not destroyed. It was simply forgotten. Buried under centuries of war, migration, and reinvention. Europe built with stone and timber for the next 1,400 years. The knowledge slept. The secret was fire. Roman builders did not just mix volcanic ash with lime and water. They used quicklime, calcium oxide, and they mixed it hot at extreme temperatures directly into the wet concrete. This was not gentle blending. It was a violent reaction. The quicklime did not fully dissolve. Tiny white chunks survived in the mixture. For 2,000 years, scientists assumed these were flaws, sloppy mixing by ancient workers. They were wrong. Those chunks are lime-clasts, and they are the reason Roman concrete heals itself. When a crack forms in Roman concrete, rainwater or seawater seeps in. It reaches a lime-clast and dissolves it. The dissolved calcium migrates into the crack and recrystallizes as calcium carbonate called freshite. The crack seals itself. No human intervention, no repair crew, no cost. The concrete fixes its own wounds and keeps going. This is not a metaphor. This is chemistry, measured and confirmed in a laboratory at MIT in 2023. But the seawater reaction is even more extraordinary. When Roman concrete sits in the ocean, volcanic ash reacts with the salt water over decades and centuries to form a mineral called aluminum tobermorite. This mineral is extremely rare in nature. It grows inside the concrete, filling voids and binding the structure tighter. The concrete does not degrade in seawater. It mineralizes. It becomes harder, denser, more resilient with every passing century. This is why the harbor at Caesarea is still intact after 2,000 years submerged in the Mediterranean. Now compare that to what we build with today. Modern Portland cement has a designed lifespan of 50 to 100 years. In practice, it often begins cracking within 20 to 30 years. 42% of bridges in the United States are over 50 years old and classified as structurally deficient by the American Society of Civil Engineers. The country spends $4.6 billion every year just on concrete repair. Highways, bridges, parking structures, foundations, pour, crack, patch, replace, pour, again. The cycle never ends. The Pantheon has stood for 2,000 years without a single structural repair. The Hoover Dam, one of the most celebrated engineering achievements of the 20th century, is already showing cracks at 90 years old. Roman harbor concrete gets stronger in seawater. Modern concrete exposed to salt water begins corroding its internal steel reinforcement within decades. The numbers are not close. They are not in the same category. Then, in 1824, a bricklayer in Leeds, England, changed everything. His name was Joseph Aspdin. He heated limestone and clay in a kiln, ground it into powder, and patented what he called Portland cement, named because the color resembled Portland stone. It was cheap. It set fast in hours instead of weeks. It could be manufactured in a factory and shipped anywhere. It did not require volcanic ash from a specific region. It did not need seawater or slow curing or skilled hands that understood ancient chemistry. It needed a kiln, limestone, and a bag. By 1900, Portland cement had conquered the world. Every building code, every engineering standard, every construction manual was rewritten around it. The American Society for Testing and Materials, ASTM, built its concrete specifications entirely on Portland cement chemistry. The Portland Cement Association, founded in 1916, lobbied governments and shaped regulations for over a century. Try to get a building permit today for a foundation poured with pozzolanic lime concrete. In most jurisdictions, you cannot. The codes do not recognize it. Not because it fails testing, but because it was never included in the testing framework. This is the replacement cycle that built a $400 billion global industry. Concrete that cracks in 30 years creates perpetual demand for repair and replacement. A bridge that lasts 2,000 years is a bridge you build once. A bridge that fails in 50 is a bridge you sell twice in a century. Multiply that across every highway, every foundation, every parking garage, every skyscraper on Earth, and you begin to see the economics. Permanence is the enemy of profit. Durability is the enemy of dependency. And there is the carbon cost. Portland cement production is responsible for 8% of all global carbon dioxide emissions. 8%, more than aviation, more than shipping. Every ton of Portland cement releases nearly a ton of carbon dioxide. Roman concrete used less energy to produce, required no steel reinforcement, and lasted 40 times longer, but it was slower. It required local knowledge. It could not be stamped out of a factory line and sold by the truckload. So, we chose the worst material, not because it built better, but because it sold better. The knowledge was not lost, it was buried under industry standards, under lobbying, under a century of codes written to protect a supply chain, not a structure. Builders who wanted alternatives were told the science did not support them. That was a lie. The science was never funded because the industry never requested it. You do not commission research into a product that would destroy your revenue model. But the evidence refused to stay buried. In 2017, a geologist named Marie Jackson at the University of Utah published a landmark study in the journal American Mineralogist. Her team examined Roman marine concrete samples pulled from the Mediterranean. They found aluminum tobermarite crystals growing inside the material. They proved with laboratory data that Roman seawater concrete does not degrade. It mineralizes. It becomes stronger over centuries. The concrete was not merely surviving the ocean, it was feeding on it. Then, in January 2023, a material scientist named Admir Masick at the Massachusetts Institute of Technology published in Science Advances the discovery that changed everything. His team identified the lime clasts. They proved that the hot mixing technique, quicklime blended at extreme temperatures, was not a flaw. It was the mechanism. The self-healing ability of Roman concrete was not accidental. It was engineered 2,000 years ago by builders who understood their material better than we understood ours. Scientists had spent decades trying to decode Roman concrete. The answer had been staring at them the whole time. Tiny white specks they had dismissed as imperfections. Masick's team then tested it. They created modern concrete using the Roman hot mixing method. They cracked it. They added water. The cracks healed. The formula works. It is reproducible. It is not a mystery anymore. It is a recipe. But a few builders refused to forget. Even before the MIT study made headlines, a quiet movement had been growing. Natural builders and permaculture designers had been using lime pozzolan mixes for foundations, root cellars, and water features for decades. Historic preservation specialists in Europe have long used Roman-style concrete to restore ancient structures because modern Portland cement is too rigid and cracks when applied to old stone. Now, the science has caught up. Multiple startups and university laboratories are developing Roman-inspired self-healing concrete formulations. The University of Cambridge is researching bioconcrete that uses bacteria to mimic the lime-clast mechanism. The United States Military Research Agency, DARPA, has funded self-healing materials programs for infrastructure that cannot afford to fail. And here is what matters to you. The basic Roman recipe is not complex. Volcanic ash, commercially available as pumice, quicklime, rock aggregate, and water. For a homestead foundation, a root cellar, a garden wall, or a water feature, the materials are accessible and the cost is a fraction of modern concrete. A bag of pumice, a bag of quicklime, local gravel. No rebar, no chemical admixtures, no proprietary blends sold at contractor markup. You do not need a contractor. You do not need a permit for a garden wall. You need knowledge that has been available for 2,000 years and was proven again in a laboratory 12 months ago. The curing is slow. That is the trade. Roman concrete takes weeks to reach full strength, not hours. But what you get in return is a material that heals its own cracks, resists water, resists salt, resists freeze-thaw cycles that shatter Portland cement, and gets stronger with every passing decade. A foundation that heals its own cracks. A root cellar that gets stronger every year. A cistern that seals itself when hairline fractures appear. A structure your grandchildren will never need to replace. That is what Roman builders had. That is what was taken from the building vocabulary and replaced with a material designed to fail on a profitable schedule. The housing crisis is not just about land prices and interest rates. It is about a construction system engineered for dependency. Every material in a modern home has a replacement cycle. Roofing, 15 to 30 years. Siding, 20 to 40. Foundation, 50 if you are lucky. Every cycle is a transaction. Every transaction is a profit center. A home built to last 2,000 years breaks that model. It cannot be financed, insured, or sold the same way. It threatens the math that holds the industry together. 2,000 years from now, the Pantheon will still be standing. The dome that Roman engineers poured without rebar, without steel, without a single material invented after the 1st century, will still hold. It will watch as the concrete towers we built in this century continue to crack, continue to crumble, continue to be repaired and replaced on schedule. We did not lose Roman concrete because the formula was too complex. We lost it because it was too permanent. Because a structure that never fails is a structure that never needs the industry that profits from failure. The knowledge was not destroyed. It was buried under codes and contracts and a $400 billion supply chain. But you cannot bury chemistry. You cannot erase what stone remembers. The formula is open. The studies are published. The concrete is waiting to be poured again by hands that understand what the Romans always knew. Build it once. Build it right. And it will outlast everything they pour to replace it. If this story changed the way you look at the very foundations of our world, please subscribe and like this video. We are unearthing the history they tried to bury. Help us preserve this knowledge by sharing these archives with those who need to remember what was forgotten. Let's build a future that lasts. The next archive opens soon.